So how do I create a quality control report? What's a quality control review anyway? I'm a broker. I'm a non-delegated correspondent. What is the scope of my review? Why is my investor asking me for a quality control report? Well, this is all questions that you need to answer as part of your mortgage broker process. So one of the things we want to emphasize to you is that your LOS, whether it's a proprietary LOS that you're getting through your wholesaler or lender, or one of the off-the-shelf types of loan origination systems, whether it's Point, Lending Pad, Arrive, etc., that's a great tool. You'll use that for collecting data, running your pipeline reports, doing reporting. Otherwise, you're going to have to aggregate that data separately into a custom report that you'll make in a spreadsheet. So how do I do QC in the first place? Well, you should follow your plan. The plan we provide gives you a process. And if it's unclear from your plan, the one that you have right now, you probably don't have a good plan. Your plan is an operating plan. In other words, it says, how do I take loans? How do I submit loans? What do I do once the loan is closed? There are 3 types of QC for a broker: the application quality, the submission quality, and the post-closing fees and document retention quality. What I will tell you is that the most important thing you can do, if you only do one thing, and we'll talk about this a little later, post-close your loans. Post-close them, check your closing fees and the document retention, that you've got everything that you need in your file in case of an examination. So your QC plan, how do I follow a QC plan? Well, we've given you one and it's pretty extensive, but let me draw your focus to a few areas. The application quality control. So what's part of that? The notice of incomplete application, super important to make sure that you're date stamping the application in case you need to provide a notice of incomplete application and withdraw the loan file. Then there's the submission review, which is, how am I going to send the loan to the lender, make sure that the exhibits are correct, and a few things you need to know about that. And then finally, as I mentioned to you before, the most important piece is the financial and compliance audit, the review of the individual loans to prepare for your state audit compliance. So once you've gone through those processes, a QC report simply is a matter of recording all your different loan findings, and you can do that in a number of different ways. We've given you a template that you can use, but whether you do it monthly or quarterly depends on the amount of volume you have and whether your investor requires a particular level. Do you need to do them monthly? Do you need to do them quarterly? Do you need to do them annually? Do them monthly or quarterly? Do them annually? It depends on what your needs are. So what should I include in that? Well, include your investor report cards, the loan level reviews that you do on the loans, and that's basically the copy of that checklist that you do at the end of the loan process to ensure that you've kept everything. A pipeline report so that you can see what you have done. So a summary of the loan types, a summary of the investors that you use, and then generally a narrative, what you did and what you found. So that's a QC report. So it's as simple as this. So you take that checklist and you assemble it as somebody else's form that we've shown. You have your own form as I've shown you in your plan, and come over and just prove that you've actually done the review. So you take that loan, put the borrower's name, show the pre-submission review, show the post-closing document review, and then if you've discovered anything missing, enter it here. That's one thing missing is a defect. The net finding, obviously you're not going to let it go, is going to be 0. Should always be 0. So that, in a nutshell, is your quality control reporting process. Step 1, review your QC plan. Understand what it says. Remember that in the broker world and in the non-delegated correspondent world, we're not underwriters. So we don't do that lender type of QC review, which involves forensically going back through a loan file and re-underwriting the loan, looking for fraud, looking for mistakes that the underwriter may have made in deciding to approve the loan. We're looking for compliance, and the first stage of compliance is making sure we have a complete application. Application QC is number 1 role for a mortgage broker. Review it, against a checklist of some sort, your complete application checklist, that has two purposes. One, make sure that you have communicated to the borrower items that are necessary to complete the application. And two, that date stamps your loan file for additional information requests. The notice of incomplete application, which is what this is, allows you to say to a borrower, we have finished with your loan. You have not provided information that we need in order to complete it, so we can withdraw your loan file after 30 days. Underwriting QC review means the loan exhibits have to be reviewed prior to submitting it to the lender. That's quality control. You're making sure you're not just throwing it up against the wall. The third piece, and the most important piece, and if there's only one level of quality control that you do, make sure you do your post-closing compliance review. 100% of your loans, in other words, not 10% or some other random sampling, should be reviewed at the time that they close, before you deposit the check. If that helps to force you to do the review, say, I'm not going to cash my check or accept these funds until I have completed the post-closing compliance review. You reconcile the fees and go through a checklist to make sure you've retained all the exhibits that you need to have in the file to ensure you pass a compliance. A complete application means we've communicated to the customer everything that's required in a standard format. This is one of your QC reviews. This also, as part of your QC plan, forms the basis of your operating plan. How does a loan originator conduct his or her job? So, post-closing random selection, when does that apply? When we are going as non-delegated correspondents or correspondents, we are expected by our lender partners to conduct random sampling reviews. The truth is that we are not going to re-underwrite a lender's loan file. We're not responsible for the underwriting decision. We're not responsible for reviewing that decision. However, some lenders do require that we offer this kind of spot check process. So here we have a standard selection criteria from an industry leader showing that depending on what your closing volume is, you will audit at a particular interval a certain percentage of your loans. This is the spot check process. This is where that 10% of loans comes from. It's really part of the industry standard, whether it's FHA or Fannie Mae, industry standard audit selection process. And the timing also dovetails with those agency standards. So whether we are doing a full forensic review as lenders, which we're not, or we are conducting these random spot checks, the most important thing is to understand what the scope of that review. Scope of the review for the non-delegated correspondent is compliance, document retention, and fees. Can you use a third-party auditor because you do not have independence in the process? Absolutely. Use a third-party review firm, but make sure that we wire fence the scope of the non-delegated audits to not include the re-underwriting of the loan file credit exhibits, such as credit reports, income and asset documentation, appraisals, etc. That is outside the scope of our review. So step 2 of the broker non-delegated correspondent quality control process is the review of the application documents prior to submission to the lender. Why are we required to do that? Well, the lender doesn't want us throwing exhibits up against the wall to see if they stick. So there are tools we've provided you with in order to do that review. And these are useful tools for the new loan processor, originator, or broker shop, not 100% clear on what makes a complete application, what is a quality loan submission. These are decision trees that allow you to dive in. So in your day-to-day process, you might have something for an experienced processor, which basically just says, yes, I've reviewed all of the documentation. A more detailed review might include this. So if you have a red flag of some sort, you might delegate down and look deeper at employment income, deeper at asset income, deeper at property income. These are the kinds of things we can do. I'll say this over and over again. If you only do one kind of quality control review. If you only do one thing for compliance as a whole, do the post-closing financial and compliance audit 100% of the time. So this process, very, very simple, and this is the data that you will utilize to create your reports if somebody asks you for a report. So the post-closing audit prep regulatory compliance checklist goes through the fees that you receive. So you review the data that you have in your LOS to make sure that your reporting is good for SAFE Act reporting or state level loan reporting. You will review to ensure that you have the final loan estimate and the final closing disclosure. You will review your fees, the application fee, the broker fees, any else that you need to record and review to ensure that you haven't overcharged the borrower, that you don't need to refund something to the borrower. Most importantly, though, is the document retention checklist. So you will go through this document retention checklist and find those things that you have in. So if you are a non-delegated correspondent, remember the loan is closing in your name, you're considered a lender. If you're a broker, it's not. These are the documents you need to retain in file. Stack them this way, by the way. You can even enumerate them and name them, but this will ensure that when you go through your state licensing examination, your state regulator audit, that you have everything in file that you need to have. So the cumulative report is simply the data that you've collected on your loans for that period. So if it's a quarter, if it's a month, whatever it is, you simply reduce that data to a table, either in a spreadsheet or export format from your LOS, or manually create one depending on the level of volume you've got and the disparity of your data. If you're using an LOS from your wholesalers, you're using your own LOS, or you just want to use a spreadsheet that you've created or we've created for you, you can find that in your folder. Then loan levels. So what did we find from doing those checklists? Were there any things missing? Gross findings. Net findings should always be 0, and put in what it was that was missing before you cured it. The gross findings are the number of things which were missing. You come down, calculate the gross defect rate and the net defect rate by dividing the total number of loans against the loans with defects. Then support the other additional information from the QC reporting by saying, generally overview of our production. So you can see the mix of our production. We can look and see if there are high risk loan types, if there's anything that's unusual in terms of the concentration. This information is used so that the reviewer of your QC review can show, hey, here's the total number of loans we had, here are the findings, this is the types of loans we did. That's your QC report. So, as I mentioned, when an investor asks you for a QC report, or a lender asks you for a QC report, you have something that you can give them. This is the information that you've been collecting all along. So use it.